Okay, so the program is now live on YouTube, right? Okay, so like I said, our first session is going to be on introduction to human resource management, and our course objectives or section objectives. We are going to explain what human resource management is all about, discuss the scope of human resource management, enumerate the HRM core principles, elaborate HRM skills or skill sets required of a HRM professional. And then we review the role of HRM in organizations, and then we look at the prospects of HRM perfection. And like I stated before we went live on YouTube, that HRM today is a body of knowledge, is a profession on its own. We have institutions today running HRM as a course, even at master's level, at PhD level, at doctorate level. So it is now a confirmed body of knowledge. Okay, so it's not just an aspect of management, it is a body of knowledge. Okay, we will not say it is independent, but it is interdependent with other management bodies, but it is on its own a body. Okay, so it has its own principles, it has its own processes, it has its own regulators. Okay, so HRM today has regulators, human resource management. I may not be able to say across all countries, but I know internationally we have bodies that regulate HRM or bodies that make policies, standards as regards to HRM. And then with Nigeria as a case, we have body in Nigeria that regulate human resource management. Okay, so HRM is not just a certification, is a body of knowledge. Just the way we have project management as a body of knowledge, we have law as a body of knowledge, we have medicine as a body of knowledge, we have pharmacy as a body of knowledge. Human resource is considered as a body of knowledge. Now, that being said, in the introduction of what we're looking at, human resource management is crucial to any organization. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're big or small, whether you're private or public, whether you're profit-making or non-profit making, whether you are government-owned or private-owned, it doesn't matter. Provided you have people working to achieve common goals in the title of an organization or a company or an association or a society or whatever name that you can think of that constitute of people coming together to achieve goals, all right? Human resource is inevitable. The management of human resources is inevitable in such environment. So the HRM application involves management of people from macro perspective. And like I said earlier, the macro perspective is more of you having mutually beneficial advantage, both for the organization and for the individual. For the organization, in the sense that he uses the people, the competent people now to achieve their goals, while in return, the organization gives benefits to the individuals in terms of remuneration, development opportunities, and every other opportunity that comes with their work packages, okay, or their employment packages. One of the major differences between human resource management and personnel administration is that human resource management focused more on the macro management of employer-employee relationship, but the personnel administration focused more on the micromanaging. So the micromanaging is more of using people to achieve organizational goals without having to bother about the development of those people. So even if we are going to have any need to develop the people, it is just going to be on the basis of developing the people for the work, not for themselves. But today we have human resource management giving you the opportunity for a study leave. Study any course of your choice, okay? It doesn't concern the organization. They pay you while you work. They pay you study allowance. They pay you your salary and every other benefit accruable to you under the study leave package of the organization, available to both public and private. There are just certain HRM policies regulations and standards within the organization. You just have to abide by. Like some organizations, they will tell you before you apply for any study leave, you must have spent 3 years. And after your 3 years, you apply. After your study leave, before you ever think of leaving the organization or going for another study leave, you work for another 3 years. Some other organizations, they will tell you 5 years. Some will tell you 10 years. But that is just internal policies to organizations, all right? So HRM is concerned with the notion of people enabling, people development, and focusing on making the employment relationship fulfilling for both management and employees, all right? That's what HRM is just focusing about. More before to personnel administration, it was making the relationship fulfilling to the employer, not the employee. So employer had little or no benefit afterwards. Okay, so if you retire from the organization or if you leave the organization, the only benefit you have is that you can only work in that line. But with HRM, you can even create another portfolio for yourself. Okay, I've seen people who, while they are at work, they took study leave. Some studied law, some studied things concerning education, some studied some peculiar things. They feel like, okay, if I live here, this is what I want to pursue. Not that if I live here, if I don't get work exactly in this field, I'm then lost. Okay, so that makes the relationship really to both parties, all right? I trust you understand the premise for which HRM is essential, the premise for relationship management, all right? Then you have the definition of human resource management is the strategic approach to managing an organization's workforce. Now, prior to now, when we talked about personnel administration, we tell you that it's about management of people in organization to achieve goals, right? But when it comes to human resource management, we tell you that it's a strategic approach. Strategic in the sense that it is broader than the concept of personnel administration. It is wider than the concept. Yes, it has elements of personnel administration inside it, but remember the premise is for us to make the relationship fulfilling for both parties, that's the parties of the employers and that of the employees, okay? And if you look at more of what we have now, in the days of strong personnel administration, where industrial relation was more of on cooperative basis, cooperative, in quote, cooperative. Now, the forces that were fighting for employee rights, employee privileges were more of cooperative based. Okay, so group of employees, they join together within the organization to form cooperative. Even till today, we still have those forms of industrial relations. You have cooperatives, associations within an organization, all right? But much more now, we have what we call the expanded industrial relations. So it is more like having corporate governance, okay, in people administration, corporate governance in the management of people. Now, there are like 3 parties involved. You have the employer, you have the employee, and then you have the union, the trade union, where the employee belongs. And in most cases, it is expected that both the employer and the employee belongs to the industrial union or to the trade union, such that where the matters arising beyond the employer and the employee, the industrial union or the trade union or the labor union can come in. So when we get to industrial relations, we'll understand more of those aspects. But if you look at the way HRM is structured today, it is much more of a strategic approach. The stakeholders are not just company-wide, rather they are, I would say they are global-wide, because anything that happens to you now as an employee, there are labor unions you can report to. That's if you belong to them, right? Now, there is also what we call the industrial courts. We have industrial courts now that address labor matters. And apart from industrial courts, in Nigeria, for a case, we have what we call the Industrial Arbitration Court that is under the Federal Ministry of Labor, Productivity, and Employment. Yeah. So you have that also dealing with labor matters, settling disputes, labor disputes between government and the labor unions. So it is much more encompassing today. It's not just a unilateral form of relationship, but now it's become more of a network relationship. Okay, so HRM today has become more like a networked relationship. And like I said, we have standard corporate governance framework that guides HRM professionals today. All right. And like I said, it's important that as a HR professional, you identify the relevant trade unions or labor unions that you should belong to. Okay. Maybe by the time we get to industrial relations, we'll be able to establish the functions of both the labor unions and the trade unions. Most often we think all of them or both of them are the same. There is a thin line between the two. Okay, so you have trade unions, or perhaps you have labor unions that are not trade unions, and you have trade unions that are not labor unions. So by the time we get there, we'll try to deal with that. But what brought me to this is to talk about the strategic dimension in terms of establishing corporate governance. Now, you also look at the strategic dimension of people development. So today in human resource management, you hear us talk more about talent management, and you hear us talk about human capital management. These are like, I will not consider them as strengths because they've come to stay. In some organizations today, they've replaced human resource management department with human capital department, human capital management department. Some have replaced theirs with talent management department. While in some organizations that are much more complex, wider, bigger, they have human resource management, some have human resource and administrative department. Now, under them or under that department, you now have talent management department, you have human capital department, you have people analytics department. So you have those focusing on data that now provides all of these to provide us with futuristic insight to the benefit of people. So the advantage is driving or developing and maintaining competitive advantage, competitive edge through the people. That's the strategic approach. Okay, so that's one of it. So I've talked about the corporate governance. I've talked about maintaining the strategic advantage through people. And I've talked about it in terms of human capital management, talent management, people development, and a whole lot more. Another thing about the strategic approach to human resource management also deals with managing change, the dynamics of the labor environment or the dynamics of the workplace environment. Okay, it makes it imperative that there must be a strategic approach to management of people. All right. Now, for instance, we have, I think since May last year in Nigeria, for a case, we've been having this discussion between government and the labor union, okay, on minimum wage, revision of minimum wage. That change is going to be introduced. Now, one thing about that change is that when it's introduced, it's not just going to be binding to the public sector. It's going to be binding to both the public and the private. So if the minimum wage is reviewed upwards, everybody called an organization that has people working under them as labor are expected to pay minimum of the required labor wage. These are changes coming up. All right. You have policies that will follow this. You have regulations that will follow this. Okay. And this will affect the labor market in a way before it will stabilize. Part of the strategic domain also in terms of changing market dynamics is the introduction of technology. Okay, we'll look at it also in a bit. The introduction of technology to HRM, it has drastically changed everything. Like in this class now, before we are done, hopefully by tomorrow, by the time we come back here tomorrow, we will tell you the software you need to download and you need to start practicing with it. As the class is going on, you practice with it. So for anyone you don't understand, you ask. Now, the intention is When you are done, you should be able to apply technology to HRM. So if you're a public sector person, you should be able to advise on the best HRM information system to be used. Okay, and these disruptions coming with changes. These changes require that you update your skills, update your competencies, update your mindset, and every other thing. Among the things we also look at, though I've just looked at it in a bit, is for us also understand the business environment. Okay, understand the business environment. If you're in the private sector, in the public sector, you understand the domain and the dynamics of your domain. Okay, this is very, very important for HRM professionals, all right? Very, very important. And these are all strategic approaches. Now, when we say the word strategy, okay, so in a layman's language, what I would say about strategy is that you take a look or you take a picture of your future, and then you come back to draft a plan, an action plan on how to get there. That's just strategy. All right, strategy is the roadmap that will take you from where you are to where you want to get to. So in the holistic adoption of HRM in organizations, it requires that we take a look into the future. And taking a look into the future, what we're really talking about is organizational change management, or in default term, change management. There are things that happened 10 years ago that today they have become norms. For instance, they happened 10 years ago, we shut them out. They are happening today and they are norm. For instance, taking this class now. I remember those days while we were in school. Okay, if you were to say that you are taking a course online, then they would consider it like you're wasting time, you're wasting resources. Nobody was going to give you any recognition to that. But today, many people are studying online than we have in the physical environment or in the physical class. These changes require strategic approaches to handle them. Do you know we talk about remote works today? We talk about remote work systems. We talk about hybrid work systems. And we also talk about the freelance work system. So by the time we get to organizational structuring and design, we'll understand more. That will be the class for tomorrow. So please don't miss it for any reason. So how do you handle the traditional work environment and then mixing it with the evolving work environment? These are strategic domains to people management. They are strategic perspectives to people management. So if I'm to talk about human resource strategic rules, I could spend another 5 days to talk about it. Okay, but that's just to establish what HRM is. And I need us to open our eyes and open our minds to that, because every other course, every other section that will be coming in will just be laying on this foundation we are building. Okay, so there are things you'll find out that you're used to, and there are things you find out that you need to upgrade yourself to them as a HR person, as a management person. Okay, all right. Coming back to my slide, human resource encompasses all the processes and activities involved in acquiring, developing, motivating, maintaining, and compensating employees. All right. In simpler terms, HRM ensures you have the right people in the right place at the right time, and we'll also say at the right cost, to help your organization achieve its goals. So we have what we call the 4 R's, the 4 R's of HRM. The 4 R's, you can write that down. It is not written here, but you can write that down. Okay, the 4 R's of HRM. The right people at the right place, at the right time, at the right cost. Right people, right place, right time, and the right cost. Right people at the right place, at the right time, at the right cost. You can write that down. That's a golden rule for recruitment, or the golden rule for HRM. Everything you want to do about HRM is just based on these 4 things. The right people at the right place, at the right time, at the right cost. Okay. Okay. Now, still on reviewing what HRM is. HRM actually has 2 legs, 2 branches. You can look at HRM as an art. You can also look at HRM as a science. HRM as a science is considered a social science because it has to do with management of relationships, or it has to do with management of interactions with people and the organizations. Okay, management of people and processes and principles and policies. For every time you see labor union react to what government is saying, they are reacting to policies, right? They are reacting to regulations. They are reacting to perhaps frameworks they feel shouldn't be the right thing to be done. Whether it is labor union on a general perspective or labor associations within the organization, anytime you see them react, they are telling you about their relationship between the policies, the regulations, the processes, the systems, the practices, the methodologies, with their own personal beliefs, their own personal behaviors, their characters, their individual differences. Okay, so that's human resource management coming in as a social science. Now, in the management of all of these interactions, there will be measurement of data on what need to be used as the basis for decision making. So you're not going to assess qualitative approaches and quantitative approaches. On qualitative approaches, you're going to be looking at statistical means, mathematical models that you could use to deduce human relationships, human behavior, human characteristics, and their relationship with organizational principles, practices, policies, strategies, and all of that. Okay, and in the theory of finding out how to maintain the right people, you need data, and you can get those data through qualitative approaches. And I've said qualitative approaches require that you do that through statistical means, mathematical means, and all of that. All right, and then you talk about the quantitative approaches where you now have to quantify behaviors. Okay, you can quantify the impact of behaviors. You look at how people interact and the impact of their interaction, the influences they are bringing. This is also very important for us to mention in case of, in the notion of our discussion, that one of the primary currency in relationship management is influence, 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 influence. People influence themselves, influence on their behaviors, influence on the characters, influence on their personalities, and all of that, right? So influence is a currency, is foundational to people management. So in quantitative approach or qualitative approach, we are trying to find out what actually influences people so that we can know how to make the right decision. And these decisions will be made in terms of making sure that we'll come up with policies that are favorable to the people. Also, please note, I will also want to establish this. As we progress, especially when we look at organizational design, we will look at different theories. We'll look at some theories, not all of the theories anyway, but we'll look at some theories associated with organizational design. So you look at things like the system theory, you look at things like the human relation theory, you look at things like the mechanistic theories, and then you could see in practical terms how they apply to us as individuals, right? So these are the scientific approaches you could use. Then you now talk about human resource management as an art. I've already established that human resource management is a body of knowledge. Today, human resource management is a body of knowledge. And as an art, it has its policies, it has its practices, it has its standards, and all of that. So as a HR practitioner, you're expected to have ethics. You're expected to behave in a way. You're expected to have standards that guide your operation as a HR person, irrespective of where you are, whether you're public or private. Sometimes when we take this course, some of the things we mentioned, some people say in the public sector, it doesn't really apply. So perhaps for now, it doesn't really apply so because of where we are coming from. But the whole essence of this professionalization agenda is to make it what it is supposed to be professionally, not to glue to what it used to be. So it talks about modifications. Okay. So the HRM is both the art of managing people, or perhaps is a science as well, because of the precision and rigorous application of theory that is applied, and then as an art because it manages people by recourse to creative in innovative approaches. And this creative and innovative approaches talks about the body of knowledge in terms of standards, regulations, policies, and the likes. In the evolution of HRM, HRM had been evolving over the years. Even before the 19th century, it has been there, but known as different things. But from the early 20th centuries, we started having the HRM emerging as its own concept. And this started from around the Greek environment. Okay, now prior to the Greek and the Romans coming up with standardizing what HRM should be, we've already had in the Chinese Empire them adopting HRM principles to their management of people. Okay, so in the Industrial Revolution, it led to HRM across boards. Okay, so in the early 20th century, while the HRM emerged as a response to the Industrial Revolution, focusing on ensuring fair treatment of workers and effective or efficient utilization of labor. Now, between the 1920s and the 1930s, the focus shifted towards personnel management, with an emphasis on hiring, training, and managing employees, often seen as a cost center rather than a strategic asset. So in the era of 1920 to 1930s, when personnel management was introduced, people were seen as elements of production, factors of production. They were not considered as assets. Rather, they were considered as tools, things that are dispensable. You can get them today, dispense them tomorrow. Okay. Now, in the 1940s and 1950s, while the human relations movement, which brought the attention to the social and psychological needs of employees, leading to a more people-centric approach to management. So the people-centric approach to management came from the human relations theory. Remember, I talked about the mechanistic theory, the systems theory, and then the human relations theory. So the human resource is actually centered on the human relations theory, which talks about the fact that human beings are not machines and shouldn't be treated as such. Why this is not an absolute management class, there are theories in management that will also bring to and fro as we look into what we're doing. Now, in management, in the evolution of management, we'll have what we call the classical theories, and then we'll have the non-classical theories. The classical theories focused more on the engineering and scientific approach to people management. So you see theories like that of Taylorism, where Taylorism focused more on study of motion. Okay, so you understand the implication of tasks and develop people to suit to the tasks. So there was no room for management of emotions. Okay, but the non-classical theory now brought in, or what we call the contemporary theories, brought in the human relations theory. Okay, the human relations theory now emphasized more on the need for people management, for management to become much more people-centric. Okay, then we have the 1960s to the 1970s, while the civil rights movement and increased government regulation that led to the development of equal employment opportunities, laws, and affirmative action programs, shaping HRM practices around compliance and diversity. So the issues of industry relations, labor unions started coming within those brackets. Okay, so government began to develop bodies or work with bodies to make sure that there is inclusivity in labor management. Then between the 1980s and the 1990s, there was the emergence, or there is the emergence of strategic human resource management, which emphasized on aligning HR practices with organizational goals, viewing employees as source of competitive advantage. And that is what is driving HRM till date. Till date. In the public sector, for instance, there had been no focus. The focus on performance has not been, I won't say it has been too high, because there have been reasons where people will even take absence from work, and when they resume by the end of the month, they are paid. But in a thorough strategic approach, your performance is tied to your remuneration. There are organizations today that have performance management systems, performance PMS systems, that as you come in, you clock in, your pay rate is calculated per hour. So for every time you're working, and it is tied also not just to an hour, but to deliverables. So for every time you clock in for duty, there are expected deliverables that warrant or that permit you allowable wages. So for some organizations that already use the computerized PMS PM systems, you clock in. By the end of the day, you already know what you're going home with. Should there be leave permissions, it is also clocked in accordingly. So while you are on leave, the necessary factors are put into consideration, and your system runs effectively. Now, where you abscond from work for reasons best known to you, the performance management system will also do your review based on what you are doing. Okay. In some organizations today, especially in the public sector, you still see them use appraisal systems. You use paper. Okay, so you pass paper from one head of department to, okay, first you start with your colleagues to head of department to director, and then you return back to the people in the performance management department. But with the PM system, with the performance management system, everything can be done from the system. It's just like you now being organizations going on to the internet. Your performance is rated on the internet. People read your performance reviews before they even come in. People make recommendations to your organization based on your performance. And those performance, most often, are reviewed online. So this strategic approach to HRM in terms of performance management now, and every other thing in terms of people management, talent management, HR analytics, employee experience, and all of that, they came into force by the 1980s and the 1990s. However, in the context of Nigeria and most government parastatals, they are still struggling to introduce this concept in full domain. Okay, like I said, in most of the organizations, they are still using paper. So they still have forms. They fill, you fill out, you write recommendations and all of that. But in a thorough HR information system, you don't need all those papers. You make your recommendation, you make everything from the system, and it is done. You see it on your dashboard. Okay, and things are wonderful. All right. Then from 2000s to present, HRM has continued to evolve with focus on talent management, employee engagement, human capital management, use of technology to streamline HRM process. Okay. Before we continue to HRM functions, do I have any question